Hey ghouls and gals, welcome back to my channel. My name is Taylor and today's video is yet another installation in my 101 horror books to read before you're murdered vlog series, where I am reading through this entire book by Sadie Hartmann, taking book recommendations section by section and reading them and discussing them with you all. Today's episode we are diving into cosmic horror, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little hesitant, I'm a little worried because cosmic horror, first of all, is not something that I ever seek out. It's not like a buzzword for me. There have been cosmic horror books that I've liked. Of course, I don't think there's like a single subgenre of horror where I just uniformly hate every single book inside that subgenre, but it's never something I seek out, and I especially hate it when it's like a cosmic twist. I really have to be in the mood for cosmic horror, and I have to be in the mood for books that I know are going to be cosmic. I just cannot stand when a book is a Southern Gothic, for example. If you've watched my cults episode, then you know I don't like when it's introduced in the latter half of the story and it just turns into something cosmic when that is not how it was recommended. And I think that's fair. So I would be lying if I didn't say that I was a little hesitant about approaching this episode of the vlog, because cosmic horror, it's not my favorite subgenre, but the books that are recommended in here, I am really intrigued in, and I'm hoping that I prove myself wrong throughout this video. So Mother Horror says, if bleak nihilistic horror sounds like something you might enjoy, cosmic horror is the subgenre for you. The bare bones of cosmic horror are existential nihilism, philosophical pessimism, natural world versus the cosmos in desolation, cosmic indifference, fear of the other or the unknown, ancient gods and deities, and tentacles. A lot of tentacles in cosmic horror. So there are 5 book recommendations in this section. I have not read any of them, so we are going to be reading 5 books in this vlog. The first one is The Ballad of Black Tom by LaValle. This one is a direct response to Lovecraft, because Lovecraft, while he did pioneer cosmic horror, there's a lot to be desired in his works. It's why I've just never even bothered to pick up a Lovecraft, just personal preference. And I like that this is in direct response and kind of challenges some of the very racist and xenophobic things that are in Lovecraft's work. So I'm intrigued. We're gonna read this one. We're also going to be reading The Worm and His Kings by Hailey Piper. This is an author that I have read from a couple of times now, and this is actually an example of a cosmic horror author that I do enjoy. Everything by Hailey Piper that I have read, and I think pretty much anything that she puts out has a cosmic spin on it. And again, I don't hate all cosmic horror, I just have to be in the mood. So I am intrigued by this one. It says it's like kind of a very Alice in Wonderland style, which is intriguing. The next book that I'm going to be reading is The Fisherman by Langan. It kind of looks like someone took this library copy fishing. It's definitely seen better days, and the next couple books I'm going to be talking about, I just noticed this, it has nothing to do with theme, but all of the authors' first names are John, which is interesting. So we'll be reading The Fisherman. We're also going to be reading A Lush and Seething Hell by Hornor Jacobs. This one is made up of 2 novellas, and Mother Horror says it's responsible for her first bookish jump scare, so that's pretty intriguing. And then last but not least, we are going to be reading Walk the Darkness Down by Boden. This one is a cosmic adventure horror western, so that's pretty intriguing. I'm going into this vlog with an open mind. Who knows, maybe this is all gonna be 5 stars and I'll discover a new appreciation and love for cosmic horror. So let's just go ahead and get started. The first book I'm going to be reading is The Ballad of Black Tom by LaValle. Mother Horror says this is the perfect introduction to cosmic horror as a whole, and specifically LaValle's work. The Ballad of Black Tom deserves to be on everyone's shelves as the gold standard for Lovecraftian fiction, and the source material, the horror at Red Hook, is not required to understand it. LaValle's novella is a response to the racist, antiquated, xenophobic ideologies present in Lovecraft's work by flipping the switch. Tommy Tester is making a life for himself in 1920s Harlem by posing as a great jazz and blues musician, even though he's not. He just looks the part. Amidst all his hustling and swindling, he finds himself embroiled with this guy that is bent on some kind of otherworldly business, a nameless, threatening fear. We also follow Irish detective Malone, Lovecraft's original narrator, a man in a position of authority who takes a passive role in the racism around him. Mother Horror says that The Ballad of Black Tom is genius. Okay, so that sounds really interesting. I'm going to go get to reading The Ballad of Black Tom. I'll check back in at the 50% mark and let y'all know my thoughts. Okay, so I finished The Ballad of Black Tom by Victor LaValle. Normally I do a 50% update and then an 100% update. However, this book is less than 200 pages, so it is a novella, and the audiobook was only like less than 3 hours long. So I just figured, because this one is so short, I did not want to split things up. I got to the 50% mark and I wanted to keep reading, and I figured because it was so short, might as well just read it all in one go. So this was okay. I don't really know how to feel about it. I usually am not one for short horror. I will say this year I have really been challenging that belief that I've held, and I found some really great short stories and short story collections that I really enjoyed. However, for the most part, when it comes to my reading tastes, when I'm looking at my favorite, I mean, this is just in general with stories in general, but specifically looking at horror fiction, my favorite horror books, they're all like pretty lengthy. None of them, I can't think of any horror novellas that I would include on my list of top 10 horror books. So, you know, I knew going in that a number of things might be going against this one. I've said, I think at the beginning of this vlog, that I'm usually not one for cosmic horror. It's not my preferred go-to subgenre of horror, and then just shorter books just generally don't do as much for me as longer fiction. However, I will say this feels like a very complete story. It's well-rounded. I didn't feel like we needed more. That's the case for me with a lot of shorter books. Sometimes I'm like, I wish we had more character development, story, whatever. This felt very complete. It has a very concise beginning, middle, and end, and I thought it accomplished what it set out to do, as well as I really enjoy Victor LaValle's writing style. I thought the writing in here was flawless. I have seen a couple of reviews for this that say that they wish that this was more cosmic, and I think that that is something that I quite enjoyed about this one. This one takes its time really delving into those really large, bombastic, cosmic elements. It starts off very much feeling just like a historical fiction piece. We're following our main character, Tommy Tester, and it is in the 1920s New York City, and he is a musician. He is in his 20s, he's taking care of his elderly father, and he gets mixed up in some business when he has to deliver a book to a mysterious client, and then another client approaches him to have him make another sort of deal, help him with something, and that something ends up being a lot more than just a quick exchange of money, a gig he thinks he's just signed up to play. Just an average musician gig turns into something a lot more cosmic. Now, what I didn't love about this book is that it is kind of divided into two sections. The first section, we're following Tommy Tester, and then in the second section, we're actually following Detective Malone, who is a very racist beat cop who is investigating the things that Tommy Tester is doing and that Tommy Tester is finding himself involved in, and I did not like that switch. It's part of the reason why I know I'm not going to seek out the story that this was inspired by. This is a reimagining, a retelling of a Lovecraft work, and just because I hated Malone in here and I have no desire to read from his point of view, which is what I believe the original story was doing, so I hated that in the second part of this book, that we followed this detective instead of Tommy, because he was always like 3 or 4 steps behind, so we wouldn't actually see like the action on the page and the things that Tommy was doing, but we would just see the aftermath and having people explain to the detective what was going on, and I just feel like it would have been more effective had we just been in Tommy's eyes the whole entire time. Ultimately, this story was just fine for me. I do think it's maybe a good introduction to cosmic horror because it's not cosmic from page one. You definitely build up to it. I liked the ambiance. I liked the writing style. I'll definitely be checking out more from Victor LaValle. And in regard to this being the start of this vlog, I'm not too disappointed by it. I thought this was a really good middle of the road read. It was short enough where even though I didn't love it, I didn't feel like I wasted my time. And because while I didn't love the story overall, I really enjoyed the author's writing style, I'd consider this a success because I'm definitely going to be checking out more books by Victor LaValle. But that is the first book in this vlog. Let's go on and move on to the next, and that is The Worm and His Kings by Hailey Piper. Mother Horror says, in Hailey Piper's The Worm and His Kings, Monique lives on the streets, taking shelter when and where she can. Everything she has in this world has been threatened by the sudden disappearance of her girlfriend Donna. In a very Alice in Wonderland style, Piper leads readers on a journey through a landscape of madness where nothing is as it seems. Monique follows a stranger into a subterranean wormhole where she encounters an underground cult and a plethora of creatures, including the one she suspects has taken Donna. So I've actually read a few things by Hailey Piper now, and I've enjoyed most of what I read, so I am intrigued to check out this one, a cosmic Alice in Wonderland style story. This one's a little bit longer than the last book, so I will be giving a traditional 50% update and then a concluding update, so I am going to go read the first 50% of this book and I'll let y'all know my thoughts. Hey friends, so I am now 50% of the way through The Worm and His Kings by Hailey Piper. This one's another short one, so even though I am dividing this up into a 50% and 100% update, it is short. It's almost 5 hours as an audiobook, so I'm about 2 hours, 2.5 hours into this audiobook, and I am really enjoying this one. I'm enjoying this one a lot more than the last one, which is great. I'm really glad that at 50% of the way in, this one seems to be working for me a lot better, but this takes place in New York in the 1990s, and we are following our main character as she is searching for her missing girlfriend. Now, both our main character Monique and her girlfriend Donna are both homeless, so they live on the streets. That really complicates how Monique goes about looking for her girlfriend, but at the very beginning of this story, she hears rumors that a monster is stalking the streets and snatching up impoverished people from the streets, and they disappear. So she thinks that Donna is one of these people. She stakes out this monster and she is determined to find her girlfriend. I like how this one immediately starts out super bizarre, super cosmic. It's definitely a monster that is taking people off the streets and making them missing persons. It's not like a question of, oh, could this be a supernatural monster or a monster of the human variety? It's definitely a cryptic creature, a cosmic creature, but Monique is fearless. She wants to save her girlfriend. So when she sees this creepy, horrifying creature, and again, this is chapter 1, this really starts off going, but Monique sees this creature and follows this creature down into the underbelly of New York City, into underground tunnels where she hopes to find her girlfriend. So I am really enjoying this one. Not a lot I want to say about it so far because again, this is another book that's a little bit on the shorter side. I think I actually noticed that when I was preparing for this vlog that a lot of these cosmic books in this selection at least tend to be on the shorter side of horror, so I am enjoying it. Hailey Piper definitely has such an interesting writing style that definitely fits like the cosmic elements, and I do like that at the very beginning you just have to accept it's cosmic, it's weird, strange things are going on, and I do like that about a Hailey Piper is that the characters, the main characters at least, do not spend any time questioning, is this real? Is it not? They're like, oh, monsters are real, let's face this scenario. So I'm intrigued. I'm a little bit creeped out by the underground and the things that are underground. I love the audiobook. The creatures in the audiobook make some very upsetting, disturbing sounds, which I think adds to the creepy experience. So overall, I'm enjoying this one. I'm going to go finish the last 50% of this one, and I will check back in when I'm finished. So Worm and His Kings by Hailey Piper, and this is my favorite book of the vlog so far. I know we've only read 2 books, but this is the one that I prefer, and I will say I liked the first half of this one better than the second half, and by no means is this my favorite Hailey Piper, but I would be intrigued again on reading more. I already planned on reading more by Hailey Piper because I think she's the author that I found most consistently writes cosmic horror that I do enjoy. So what I enjoyed about this one, I loved our main character Monique. I really enjoyed her and the journey that she goes on throughout this very short book. There is like an internal journey and then of course an external journey as well, and I really liked the way that that was explored. It is worth mentioning that Monique is a trans woman and Hailey Piper is as well, so the rep is done really well here, and there are some events in Monique's past. She does experience a lot of transphobia, particularly in the medical field, so be on the lookout for those triggers, but I thought that was handled really well, and the way in which Monique's past and the things that she had to deal with in the past influences her quest during this book and the ways in which she goes about doing things and reacting to trauma and horrific experiences. I thought that was some of the best parts of this book. This is a short book. The audiobook is just 5 hours long, and I still felt like we got a lot of character development for Monique, and I just thought that was one of the really strong selling points of this story. There's a cult in here, which I do love, occulty horror. However, I wish it was explored more, and I think that's my biggest critique of this book as a whole, is that the story feels too epic in scope to be contained within such a little book. This book could have easily been in the 300, potentially even grazing up to 400 pages, like just with the backstory and just the cults and the things that they believed, and it was all so interesting. However, the second half of the book felt very exposition heavy. We find out a lot of information through characters just sitting our main character down and saying, this is what's going on, and then gives like a monologue. So I wish that were like broken up a little bit, and I think lengthening this book would have done exactly that. I really enjoyed all the pieces, but they just felt so condensed, and I just needed them to be drawn out. There is a book 2 to this series. This can be read as a standalone. Try not to give too much away, but it looks like, looking at the synopsis of the next book in the series, it's not like a traditional sequel continuation where the first book doesn't stand on its own, but it's kind of a spin-off, a branch off into the same events or the same kind of story. So I don't know if I'm going to pick that one up or not yet. If I do at this point in the year, it's just going to go on my TBR, and I'll probably get to it next year because I'm not itching to pick it up. This book I thought ended really well. It ended definitively, and while I am interested in the culty aspects and potentially that would be expanded upon in another book in this series, I liked the way that this story and this character arc wrapped up. I thought it was compelling. I really enjoyed the audiobook. I would recommend the audiobook. There are a lot of strange sounds that different cosmic creatures make, and I think hearing that adds a lot to the horror. So overall, I did enjoy this one. I wished it was longer and explained a lot of things a little bit more, but I did enjoy it. Let's move on to the next book, which is going to be The Fisherman. Mother Horror says The Fisherman is one of horror's greatest treasures. It features a nested story within a story. Dan and Abe are acquaintances who are both grieving the death of their wives. They form a relationship around their mutual loss and their love of fishing, which ultimately leads them to a fishing hole of local legend, Dutchman's Creek. The men encounter Dare Fisher, who leads them into a great exchange. The Fisherman is a great equalizer because every reader is invited to the table to engage with the same story, but will experience different outcomes. Some will walk away feeling a certain way, while others will describe their feelings in an opposing way, and neither is wrong. It will be interesting to see where you land. So I'm now going to read The Fisherman by John Langan. I will say I see this one recommended a lot in different horror spheres. I didn't know that it was cosmic horror, but I'm intrigued to have the physical book, obviously, as well as an audiobook checked out from Hoopla. So I'm going to go get to reading, and I will check back in at the 50% mark and let y'all know how I'm feeling. Okay, so I'm 50% of the way through The Fisherman and I am really invested. I'm really enjoying this one a lot more than I thought. This did have a rocky start because the first part of this book, we're following two widowers and they are fishing together. That's how they are making connections, kind of not moving on from their wives' deaths, but finding little joys to enjoy life again after they both were widowed in really tragic circumstances. In a lot of ways, and I hesitate to say in what ways, but in a lot of ways, the first section of this did kind of feel like the first section of Revival by Stephen King. However, I was really bogged down by all the fishing talk. It was a lot, and I'm sure it's going to continue to be a lot. Obviously, you're like, Taylor, the book is called The Fisherman. It's gonna be about fishing, but I had these same kind of issues with Scott Thomas's, I think Violet was what it was called, when the mother and the daughter, they're renovating this house, and that's intriguing, but the minutia of renovating a house was detailed so much, like all of the specific carpentry steps and just every single little tiny piece of just minutia was included, which made that not like a fun experience for me. This has so much about fishing and I don't care about fishing. I'm sorry, it's not something that I'm interested in. So there's like a lot of page time dedicated to this, our main character learning how to fish, getting the fishing rod, getting all the equipment, explaining the equipment and what the equipment does and different kinds of equipment and different places to fish, describing all of that in a lot of detail. So while I did like the parts about male friendship and these two unlikely like people, they're co-workers, but they're bonded together by a love of fishing and unfortunate shared circumstances. So I did like that. However, we get about, I want to say maybe 15 to 20% of the way into this book and they go to a diner and they are being told a story by someone else. And so right now I am in the midst of that story and I think it's going to take us pretty much to the almost end. Like I think pretty much half of this book is going to be this story within this story and then we'll switch back to the other two characters for the end. But I'm really enjoying the story within the story a little bit more than the actual story. That is rarely ever the case, but it's like a historical tale about things that happened on the land where these two men are planning on going fishing and why it's maybe not such a great spot to fish and the things that are happening in this event, the characters that we're following, and just the small town that is being affected by what is going on. I'm really intrigued by it. I like the cosmic elements and I'm having a good time overall. So I do think I want to just point this out because I don't want to lose it, because I had an epiphany when I was reading this book. I'm really enjoying this book. However, what this book does, what I think a lot of cosmic horror does, and maybe a reason why I don't love it, is that it tends to be either very pessimistic or very nihilistic. And that's not actually what I love about horror. What I love about horror is people overcoming, like the light at the end of the proverbial tunnel, how even when you have all of the odds stacked against you and all of these horrors and all of these terrors, like there's a human light, there's a human element. And just, I think Stephen King, he's one of my favorite authors, but I recently listened to an interview with him, and I think actually, no, it was, well, I did listen to an interview where he does talk about this, and that's what he finds exciting about the horror genre, but also Mike Flanagan was talking about it, and the thing is, like, what is not interesting about horror, it's not necessarily the monster, but it's the people that come together to fight the evil and to fight the darkness. That's what I love. So a lot of times, the nihilistic feel of cosmic horror just is not what I prefer in horror and what I love so much about horror, but this does have those elements, but this one is really working for me, surprisingly. I know I had some qualms about the fishing elements, but I'm really enjoying the story within the story, and I'm hoping that when we return to the other story that I'll continue to like the momentum just as much for the final 50% of this book. So I'm going to go read the last 50% of this book, and I will check back in later and let y'all know my final thoughts. So I finished The Fisherman by John Langan, and I don't know how I feel about this one. I didn't love it. I was kind of getting vibes towards the 40-50% of this one that this could be my favorite book in this vlog so far. However, I didn't love the ending. I felt like it really petered off. The story within the story I loved. If the story within the story was this actual novel, I would be rating this one so much higher, but the framing story with Abe and the fishing and what they do, I didn't like it. I felt like, first of all, the writing styles between the framing story and the story within the story felt different. I'm sure intentionally, because one is like someone is telling our main character story, but I liked the storytelling aspect of that story more. I thought it was more engaging, and I also felt like when we found out the cosmic elements and the magical elements about what was happening, then it cheapens the reveals for the last section of this book, because we already know what these men are going up against. We already know what happens with the fishermen and with this creek area. So the ending really petered off for me. My favorite parts of the story were the story within the story. I liked those aspects, and I loved the cosmic elements of that story. I thought it was really cool. That's where the scares came in for me and the really unsettling imagery, but just the beginning and the ending of this one, I didn't like. I didn't like how it ended in particular. I really did not like the last chapter and the way in which things wrapped up, and I didn't particularly like the writing style. So unfortunately, even though I was optimistic about this one, I don't think that it's the one for me. However, if you are looking to dip your toe into cosmic horror, or if you like cosmic horror, I think you should read this one. I'm in the minority when it comes to Goodreads. Pretty much everyone else is rating this 4 stars, 4.5 stars, 5 stars. Clearly, it's me and not the books, and I'm honestly feeling a little bit nervous to upload this vlog because I don't know how fair it is to these books, because I don't like cosmic horror. I'm learning that throughout this vlog, that it's not ever going to be a favorite genre for me. I worry that, I'm trying as hard as I can to give all of these books a fair shot, but I'm really not finding a lot that I'm enjoying about these books. And I know this is a curated best of list, so I'm very hesitant for the last 2 books in this vlog. And it's I don't know, it could also be just like the time of year that I'm going through right now, and just like personally what I'm looking for out of a book. I think I've mentioned this before. This vlog has been taking at least 2 months by this point to film, but I think I have mentioned before that cosmic horror, the nihilistic aspects of it, really don't appeal to me and what I love about horror. And especially right now, I'm craving something just a little more hopeful and less like nihilistic. So yeah, The Fisherman, I would recommend if you like cosmic horror. This one seems to be like the darling in the subgenre community. I feel like a ton of people recommend this. This resonates with a lot of people. I did like a lot of what this had to say about grief, but nothing that was in here was a conversation that I didn't feel like another book that I've read before, like those books kind of did it better. So there was nothing new or exciting in here for me. Not that every book has to have that, but just really, especially with the way that this was framed, that I ended up enjoying the B plot of this story essentially more than the actual story. That it just missed the mark for me. So with that book out of the way, we are moving on to the next book in this vlog, and that is A Lush and Seething Hell by John Hornor Jacobs. Now this book is actually made up of 2 different novellas. The first novella is titled The Sea Dreams It Is the Sky, and it is about a poet named Raphael Avendano. He's mysteriously known as the Eye. He strikes up a casual friendship with a woman named Isabel. This is a thought-provoking tale about that deepening relationship. And then the second story is My Heart Struck Sorrow, which is about a librarian who is weighed down by grief and guilt. He goes on an assignment with a coworker to an estate left in their company's possession by a philanthropist who has passed away. They find a long forgotten room filled with recordings and journals, and it apparently has found footage as a framing device. So for this one, because it is 2 novellas wrapped inside this story, I'm not going to do a 50%. I think it is going to to be split pretty 50-50 between these two, but I am going to start with reading the first story, which is The Sea Dreams, It Is the Sky, come and give an update about this one, and then I'll read the second novella and then give an update about that and kind of give a little bit of a review and analysis about these two novellas as a whole. So I'm gonna go dive into that first story. I'll check back when I'm done with it. Hey friends, so sorry if the background noise or the lighting is a little bit weird. I am on vacation, it is late at night, but I did finish the first story in a Lush and Seething hell, and that would be The Sea Dreams, It Is the Sky. So this is not actually like the halfway point of this short story collection. This one's about 40%, and then the next one's going to be a little bit longer, but for this one, we are following our main character. She's a teacher at a university, and she befriends a poet. This poet and her have a lot in common. Their stories have some very interesting connections, including that they both are from the same homeland, and for various reasons they cannot go back. However, Avendaño, who is this poet, goes on a mysterious mission back to his homeland, and when he is gone, he has our main character watch over his house. While she's doing so, she discovers some letters, some photos, and some writing from this poet that seems to be an account of events that he experienced, and these accounts do not seem like his normal work, and they seem very sinister. Now, for this one, I thought the buildup was so engaging. I don't know what it is about these characters that really captured me just from like the very get-go. I was interested in the way this one was written and how everything was set up, and then the mystery of reading little snippets of Avendaño's work as our main character is going through them. I thought that was really interesting. I liked the horror elements. This one does have a lot of body horror, in particular trigger warnings for pretty graphically depicted torture scenes. However, this one I just felt like the ending did not live up to the expectations. I loved the build-up, and then the ending, it just kind of ended, so I don't really know what more to say about this one. I do like the writing style, which has me very intrigued for the next short story because, like I mentioned earlier, the next short story is a little bit longer, so I am intrigued. The writing style was really good, and I liked the blend of everyday normal and the cosmic. I liked that balance, so here's hoping that the second one is going to be something that I enjoy, because I did overall enjoy this story, just the ending a little bit of a letdown. Now, I have heard that the next one is kind of found footage in a sense, which is really exciting because I love found footage horror. It's probably one of my favorite subgenres of horror. I know that's probably controversial, but I do tend to like found footage horror. There are some really great ones out there, but even like the bad ones, I tend to have a really fun time with. So here is hoping that that is the same for the next story in this collection. So I'm gonna go get to reading that. You'll probably see me in a more traditional update with my regular background, but I am on vacation now, so I'm gonna go get back to having fun on my vacation, and I will talk to y'all later with another reading update. Okay, so I finished my Heart Struck Sorrow, which was the second novella in the Bind Up a Lush and Seething Hell, and I enjoyed this one more than the first one in this collection, and I think this is my favorite story of this vlog so far. It just really worked for me. A fun thing about this one to point out is that the narrator for this short story was MacLeod Andrews, and he actually narrates, I'm familiar with his work because he narrates a lot of the Warrior Cats books by Aaron Hunter, so it was really entertaining to listen to someone who I've only really heard read middle grade read a darker adult story, and it was just amusing because sometimes with some of the characters I'd be like, oh, Tiger Star, is that you? But I did enjoy it, and I do think he is a great narrator, but I always think it's funny when I can identify a voice like that because I feel like, not all the time, but for the most part, a lot of audiobook narrators tend to stay within genre. Like, they tend to have a distinctive brand. At least that's what I've noticed for a lot of my favorite narrators, is that they tend to stick within certain genres. But, you know, sometimes we get a wild card like MacLeod Andrews, and I really enjoyed the audiobook production. This was such an interesting story, and I felt like because it was a story that relied so much on audio and immersing yourself into music and recordings, that the audiobook worked really well. So in this short story, we are following an archivist who works for the Library of Congress, and he gets this mission. I don't know, not mission is not the right word, but he gets this assignment. A benefactor has died and has willed a bunch of their personal effects to the Library of Congress, including a lot of like audio recordings and sound recordings. So our main character and another archivist go to this house. They discover these tapes, these recordings of folk songs down throughout the South from the 1930s, in particular tracking one very specific song that has definitely a different meaning and a different moral if you were to listen to a Black musician versus a white musician of the day play it. So as they are going through these tracks and listening to these audio components of songs and maybe some other things that were captured on the recordings, we also find a journal from the man who was collecting these recordings, and the archivist gets really wrapped up in this man's story because not only is he recording songs and oral tradition folklore, but he might have captured something truly sinister, and that is what I liked about this one. I liked the found footage style of elements. Honestly, I think this one would make a really cool movie. Like, the setup almost reminded me just a little bit of Sinister, because we have like a story and we have a person that's uncovering a bunch of footage, and then sometimes you see the footage and see what is happening with the different characters that the footage is about and the person who is collecting this found footage, for lack of a better word. So I did really enjoy that aspect. This one, I felt like the other one, had kind of a bit of an abrupt ending because I was listening to it on audiobook. I wasn't paying attention to how far I had gotten through this one, and so when it came to the last chapter, I was like, wait, is this the last chapter? And I checked and it was, so it did feel like a little abrupt, but not in a bad way, because while I felt like a lot of the build-up and then the abrupt ending was unearned kind of in the first book in this bind-up, this one I felt like it did wrap up things well, and the fact that I just wanted more. I just wanted this to be a longer story. I was so enraptured by the story and the way that this story was being told. I just wish that it had gone on for a little bit longer than it was, but I did enjoy it. I will say, I think a lot of people may pick this up and read it and be like, this is not cosmic horror. This felt very light on the cosmic horror to me, and that might be why I enjoyed this one overall the most out of this vlog. Especially the second one felt very Southern Gothic, very folk horror, and I really tend to enjoy those subgenres of horror a whole lot more. So I had a good time with this one. I will say, in particular, the author, John Hornor Jacobs, did such a great job of researching subject matter, time and place. You could tell from the acknowledgments and the author's notes that he did a lot of research and had sensitivity readers for the things that he was tackling within this book. So I did have a pretty good time reading this one, and I'm feeling a little bit more optimistic to dive into the very last book in this vlog, which is going to be Walk the Darkness Down by John Boden. Mother Horror says, here's a weird, cosmic, adventure, horror western. If I have to categorize this book by genre, I would say it's something like Stephen King's The Dark Tower meets Joe Lansdale's The Drive-In. This is a rare opportunity for readers to fall in love with unlikely heroes engaging in an epic battle against the most formidable enemies you've ever read, both human and cosmic. This one is also very short. It's less than 200 pages, so I am not going to give a 50% update. I'm just going to read it all and just give give a review of the book as a whole because I just feel like that works better for such a short book. Again, this is only about 160, 170 pages, so I am intrigued. I am a little nervous. It's cosmic, it's Western. Western is a horror genre, a horror subgenre that is very hit or miss for me, and as we're finding out from this vlog, cosmic's very hit or miss for me as well. So I am cautiously intrigued. I'm going to go get to reading this one, and I will check back in later when I've completed it. Okay friends, so I finished Walk the Darkness Down, and I'm really surprising myself with the fact that I think this book was my favorite out of this entire vlog. It is a cosmic Western. It's a weird Western. I don't want to give too much away because it is on the shorter side, but we are following a variety of characters. We are following Jones and Keaton, a young boy named Duvall, and his sisters, and they are all travelers on a desolate landscape, and they are all destined to meet and have their paths intertwine. We're also following Levi, who is a boy at the beginning of the book who has something horrible happen to him, and he becomes a very interesting and very unsettling antagonist. So we are following these characters as they learn how their paths intersect and intertwine, and they're all destined to meet each other by the end of this book. This one is short. It is very bleak. Now, the writing style is not my typical writing style of things that I enjoy. The sentences are very choppy. I don't think commas are used, if ever. So if you're thinking of like a normal compound or complex sentence where it does have commas, semicolons, colons, like separating larger sentences, you don't get any of that. You actually have just, instead of commas, you'll have periods and then starting the next sentence. Very choppy, very like stilted at some points, but it really worked for this narrative because this narrative was short and it was brutal, and I thought that this had a perfect balance of cosmic elements and Western elements. The body horror in here was gruesome. There were some very like vivid imagery that was happening that was very unsettling, very cosmic. I thought this one set out with a certain goal in mind and absolutely accomplished it. I will say I understand why Mother Horror said that this was a little bit of the gunslinger, because I did feel at the beginning of this you're really just thrown in. There are a lot of world building things, for lack of a better word, that you're not necessarily sure what is happening. You're never sure what Levi is, what happened to him. You're not too sure about, again, not trying to give too much away, but there are different characters or things that are introduced on the journey that you don't know a lot about. You'll never know a lot about, including like the characters of the sisters, but I thought that was a part of the wonderful cosmic atmosphere. So this one absolutely delivered. It's definitely very grim and gruesome, and because it is such a short story, I think that very bleak, very nihilistic feel absolutely worked for this one. So I feel pretty happy that I am ending this vlog with such a win. I will say I did learn that, I learned a little bit more about what I like and what I don't like in cosmic horror. What I like about cosmic horror is the fact that a lot of it has to deal with forbidden knowledge, getting books or tomes or different pieces of media and learning hidden knowledge, forbidden knowledge, and the horrors that come out of it. I like the found footage feel that a lot of these tended to have, where we had characters finding things and learning things that they were not supposed to learn. I really like those aspects. What I didn't like, I don't love the nihilism that is very present in cosmic horror, and I think it's really telling that the shorter stories tended to work better for me in this one as a whole, just because I think a very bleak and nihilistic novella, I can sit with that and enjoy it more, then I don't want to read like 400, 300 pages of just pure nihilism, pessimism. Like I don't want to read that for me. So just in terms of ranking all of these different stories, my least favorite was The Fisherman. I liked the story within the story. I didn't like the actual story, and I didn't love a lot about this one. There were several gross sexual scenes that I felt like were added for shock value rather than like propelling the story along, and just the prose, not my favorite. And there was a lot about fishing, which is on me for reading a book called The Fisherman, right? But this one, I just have a very unpopular opinion. I didn't enjoy my time with it. Again, if it was just that story within the story and it was a shorter novella, this could have been a lot higher on the list. I just didn't like the framing story. The next one is The Ballad of Black Tom, which feels weird to put it this low because I think this one has the writing style that I loved the most throughout this vlog, but I just didn't like how segmented this one was. I didn't like the protagonist switch from the first section to the second section. I just felt like we lost a lot of momentum and we lost a lot of just interesting action when we switched from Tommy Tester to Malone, and I didn't love that, and I didn't love the way that this was executed, but the writing style was phenomenal in this one. It just left a little bit to be desired. The next one is The Worm and His Kings by Hailey Piper. This one, again, excellent character work. I loved the character work in this one probably the most out of all of these books, but I don't know if I'm being a little unfair, but I've read things from Hailey Piper before that I've liked more than this one, and again, I just felt the second half of this one, it was a lot of info dumps and characters just telling other characters what was happening instead of the characters just experiencing the story, so that's why that one was a little bit lower for me. The next one is going to be Lush and Seething Hell. Now for this one, if it was just the last story, this one probably would have been my favorite of the vlog, but the first story didn't work for me as much, but I did enjoy the writing style, and I would be intrigued to check out more by the author because I was really impressed by the character work that was done, even though these were shorter volumes. And then of course, my favorite was Walk the Darkness Down. I'm very surprised, I'm very pleasantly surprised by this one. Again, Western, cosmic, those are not, like when I would list my favorite subgenres of horrors, those are not normally near the top, but this one just really worked for me. It was gruesome, it was brutal, I felt like it really accomplished what it set out to do. The pacing was perfect, the story, the way that everything wrapped up, I thought this one was just such a great example of how to do a very brutal, very nihilistic cosmic horror. So that is going to be it for this vlog. I am rapidly losing light. I'm not too sure why. I think maybe a storm's coming because it looks like I'm filming this like in the evening. I'm not, I'm filming it in the middle of the day, but very dark lighting, so apologies about that. So thank you all so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please be sure to give it a thumbs up, leave a comment down below, subscribe to my channel for all of the bookish, horror, and cozy gaming content. Stay safe, stay spooky, and I will see y'all in the next video. Bye!